Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would answer the question of why I'm doing floor presses again. Number of reasons. Number one, I just felt like doing them. I know that for me personally, I feel like the floor press builds my chest, triceps, everything else just as well as a bench does, and it has direct carryover. In other words, I've had periods of time to where I trained exclusively the floor press, and when I go back to benching, I can bench more than I floor press. So in other words, if I build my floor press up to 315 with a pause, my pause bench is like 325, even if I haven't done a bench in 3 or 4 months. So for me, it is actually a direct carryover movement, and it's largely because I have a big rib cage structure. I have a big back. I've always had a big back from training. So I can usually touch my chest or get within an inch of my chest, depending on if I choose to use any arch or just go more or less flat back. And so for me, it is effectively a long range of motion exercise. It really is. And so it's just easier to set up sometimes because I don't have to wheel my bench out. And like for my home gym, I've been thinking about starting to do light deadlifts every day and just leaving my deadlift bar loaded on the floor to start working my deadlifts back in now that my back is recovered. And so if I want to do that, then I don't have to move any of that. I don't have to mess with the bench. I can just leave a bar there set up. So I thought maybe I'll go back and mess with the floor press. And like I've said before, the floor press for me personally is interchangeable with the bench. I have 100% carryover. I can literally not bench, like I said, for a long period of time and progress on the floor press and PR on the bench. Not everyone is built that way. For some people, depending upon your structure, if you're 4 or 5 inches above your chest on a floor press, you might not build the mobility you need in your chest. You might need to do some dips and other stuff in addition to the floor press so that you can safely bench later, so that you don't pop a teddy like Junkie Ward did, right? You guys got to be aware of that stuff. So it varies a little bit from person to person, and this has to do with individual structure, but I like the floor press. And the reason I like it is the simplicity of it. I don't have to have a bench set up. Hell, I could go throw my bench in another room if I wanted just to get it out of the way. It doesn't really matter at this point. And so that's part of the beauty of it is simplicity of equipment. And I like that, particularly if I can get a similar range of motion and everything else, just less equipment having to be moved around. With more time spent training, less time spent messing with setups. The other thing to consider there is the dead stop involvement. It forces me to get super strict. Now, as far as being strict on these things goes, I don't mean it in the isolation sense because this is still very much a compound movement. But you know, it's funny because you'll see people who do bodybuilding stuff and they'll do something to slightly more isolate a muscle, and everyone understands, hey, oh, there you go, he's isolated the muscle more. You know, but when you do something like a floor press where you have the ability to remove leg drive, people don't get it. And some people would argue, well, that the leg drive could be beneficial. You're moving more weight, right? It's like, well, not necessarily, because it's a softer start, and it's natural to use leg drive on the bench press once you sink it, and you're pushing more weight up, but it's not a substantial amount of work. It would be different if your legs and hips and everything got actual work from doing it, but they don't. Not if you're doing any sort of squatting or anything else. So they're not necessarily getting a benefit. So it's that dead start is forcing you to use your chest completely. Now, in my opinion, and I did kind of see something similar on Bret Contreras' EMG stuff, right? His EMG stuff showed a similar thing, that it does seem to work a little more chest, particularly upper chest, at least, again, if we go off EMG data. Now, what is it I'm telling a lot of you guys out there? Guys, you're going to go chase that aesthetic thing. The reason I tell you to do the press, remember? And I'm specializing in the press right now. Why? Because it's an all-around badass exercise, but as I continue my cut, I know that the press yields that certain look. It helps with that golden era look the dudes had. And even though I'm not a bodybuilding fan, I can respect that era, right? I can respect that era. And so for me, I want to build that area up. Things like my shoulders, my whole shoulder girdle, my delts, upper chest, traps, triceps, right? Those are muscles that do yield a certain look, and it does yield a powerful, strong, athletic look. And so as I continue to cut body weight, I want to specialize in making sure those areas are big. Hell, that's more important than biceps, to be honest. You don't even see me doing curls right now. So if I were to look at these different chest presses I have available, the floor press becomes a valuable tool if we're thinking in terms of that dead stop training. But we'll get to that in a second. I do like the dead stop aspect, but the fact that you are having to recruit a little more chest early on, there is at least some data to suggest better muscle fiber recruitment in the whole chest, and particularly the upper chest. Well, that helps build those areas. And number two, that's going to carry over to my press. This exercise, particularly done with a fairly closed grip, is going to have better transfer to the press. Is it going to be enough of a difference to make a difference? Maybe not. But when I'm looking at it from that perspective of, for me, it's 100% bench training. I get everything I get out of a bench. It carries over to my bench. If I put 50 pounds on my floor press, my bench will go up by 50 pounds without training the bench every single time. That's just my structure and the way that my body works with this lift. May not be the same for you, and I do want to keep that in mind. So if I can train my bench and do a variation that might work some of the muscles I need a little more for my press, that will carry over to the lift I'm wanting to specialize in more, that's a win. That's a win. That makes this a good primary exercise for me, even though I'm using it technically as an assistance movement. I can treat it like a primary exercise in this case, and that's fine. Works great. Works great in that case. So I've got that to consider for doing my press specialization. Then we come over to that dead start training, right? Dead start, dead stop, right? Same thing. Same reason I tell guys deadlifts, reset on your every rep on your deadlifts. I like lifts to where you come off the floor. In fact, the only lift I'm not doing dead stop right now is my front squat, isn't it? And it's only because of the nature of the exercise, and I might keep it how it is. Everything else is dead stop as I can get it. Strict pause on the standing press. Dead hang on the pull-up. Floor press is my main chest press, right? Deadlift with a reset every rep. Dead stop training. There is something to be said for that. What I would usually tell people that the two best ways you're going to get any sort of superior muscle fiber recruitment is going to be through what? Either complete dead stop training, right? Compensatory acceleration from a dead stop, or a stretch reflex. Now, it's harder to get a stretch reflex with the barbell bench, isn't it? It really is. That's where weighted dips, that's where dumbbells shine. That's where those two exercises shine, getting a myotatic reflex in your pectorals. We can sure get a much better dead stop with this, and since we can't use leg drive to get it initiated, it's all chest. Your chest has to fire it out of the bottom, and then obviously triceps play a big role locking it and everything, but your chest has to fire it out of the bottom. Even with a closed grip on this, you will feel it in your chest tremendously with that pause on the bottom. Even with a lighter weight. Now in my case, I don't use a lighter weight really. I'm doing sets of 4 with the same weight I did sets of 5 with the closed grip bench with a pause. You know, it's like 1 rep difference because I only get about 10 pounds out of the leg drive versus doing this unless I arch tremendously, and I don't like to do a real big arch. And you know, this is always something I could transition to a wider grip later on the floor, a little more middle grip instead of my shoulder width right there, thumbs on the smooths. But I'm doing it that way because, again, I feel like I need more tricep in general. Could argue about the tricep involvement there more. It's easier on the shoulders, but it also is the grip width I use for the standing press. You guys see where I'm going with this? Again, so I'm using that same grip width I use for the press because I want to specialize in that exercise. But this is another compound movement that lets me get more chest, use a little heavier weight on a press. So it does work the triceps and stuff a little bit different. I think right now between these two lifts, that's going to give me what I need. This will give me the chest development I need to make sure that I maintain. It will help improve my press, which is a lift I need to improve and get better at and want to specialize in, the lift I'm doing the most volume with every week. So it works out really, really well in my overall training, my overall philosophy. In addition to the fact, the big plus, once I roll that bar there, and I actually have it set up there now, I'll leave it there probably. Doing my light deadlifting, I can leave a barbell loaded with the deadlift, and it'll be basically where my feet are now. I'll be able to leave that there and do this lift, hopefully. without having to move my weights and stuff around, because I won't be able to do that the same with the bench kicked out there. So it works. It works for me on a lot of levels with what I'm doing. And that's sometimes the reason we pick exercises. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.